with the S2 in it. Special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly to order. Mr. Peterson, would you kindly lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Madam Clerk, would you kindly call the roll?
Mr. Trainey.
Here, ma'am.
Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall is absent. Ms. Johnston. Mr. Starr. I will mark Mr. Starr as absent, although I know he's in the building. Mr. Flynn.
Present.
Was here.
Mr. Steele.
Here.
Ms. Demboski.
Present.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Evans.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us to item 4A. That's AO 2014-118, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly adopting and appropriating funds for the 2015 general government operating budget for the municipality of Anchorage, brought to us by the Office of Management and Budget, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 553-2014. We have the original version, an S version, an S1 version, and an S2 version. May I please have a motion?
Second.
The S2 version has been moved and seconded. We do have amendments before us. As noted previously, Mr. Starr is not yet present, so I would ask that we...
Chairman, Mr. Starr is just walking through, and let's wait for a minute for him to sit down, please.
Okay, very good.
Yes, Bill, we're waiting for you, sir. I'm sorry. That's all right. We figured we'd wait for you.
Sir, we're on amendment number 1, which I believe at this point is yours. We have the S2 version of the budget before us.
I do not plan to move it.
Okay, thank you, sir. That brings us to amendment number 2. Ms. Gray Jackson or Mr. Trainey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to move amendment number 2, and that amendment is reinstating a vacant associate planner in the Community Development Department. This position is very much needed. Community planning has taken a beating throughout the years, losing positions forever and forever, and I think that it's really, really important for us to reinstate this position so that they can do their job with a little bit less stress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, Mr. Weaver, I'm sorry, I've been still working my way through this one.
Good evening, Mr. Weaver.
Good evening. Good afternoon.
Same thing. Ms. Johnston?
How long has this position been vacant?
It's probably been vacant about 6 months or so, maybe 8.
And did you try to fill this position?
We did. We recruited. We had a viable candidate. New budget was coming up. I left the position open, decided not to fill it until the budget was decided.
And then I noticed I asked from the administration when the administration had asked this fall to have departments do a 0.5% cut of their department. I noticed that community development didn't take a cut this fall, is that correct?
Well, there were proposals for the half percent cut that was in the budget. Depending on what the Assembly does this evening, and putting positions back in on the building side and the planning side, if all the positions went back in, there would be no cut.
But you didn't take a cut this fall. This position was
Yes.
still on the fall budget.
It's in the present budget.
Yeah, okay. And then this summer, one of your long-term tasks is the land use plan. And this summer, actually, you gave me your latest draft of your land use map and said you were really close to finishing that. How close are you finishing the land use plan map?
The staff has been analyzing now with the GIS people. We've put GIS personnel on it to help analyze the demand, and probably it's going to be the second quarter of next year before the Assembly would see it.
And so, I mean, my ultimate goal is to free up Erica, but I've got to figure out if this really frees up Erica. I know that her job, is she over long-range transportation at this point?
She is not. She's the manager of current planning. What this position will do will free up some of her time, though.
But she's the manager of current planning, so she's the manager of, she's basically our resource for Title 21, is that correct?
She is the main contact, go-to person for the...
So this position really doesn't have an effect on her job, correct?
It does, because they all work together. The workload is spread across both divisions, long-range and current planning. There's a lot of overlap.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. I would like to note, by the way, I didn't earlier, that Mr. Starr joined us just as we were getting going, and Mr. Hall has joined us telephonically. With that, Mr. Starr?
I just have generic comments about this topic. We've gone back and forth with multiple budgets, increasing labors, taking away labors, and moving labors. And, what I believe to be the pressing need is the service product we develop for our plan review, building stuff, moving forward with that. I have plenty of plans on my shelf at home. And it's not to detract from what the planners are doing every day, but I have not heard the scrambling nature that my comprehensive plan in Eagle River needs to be upgraded, or that it's been 11 years since my transportation model has been that. There are times that it is helpful to know what a previous administration or a previous assembly member has wanted to have happen in a certain area, but we're not scrambling per se for an unmet need that has any prevalence with life safety, or you got a developer that wants to buy stuff and build stuff and turn that into property taxes. So we've had these conversations, trust me, and I understand that, but in cases where we give the money and they don't fill them, that's frustrating, as well as I'm not certain that the Title 21 need, no offense to Ms. Johnston, is the urgent need. We've stood down on that for 18 months. What I heard was not a definitive answer that we would even get additional laborers committed to Title 21. That would have been a great answer. Yes, she'll get her, and yes, she'll have committee support, all the other stuff. I'm not asking for committee support for the Chugach Access Plan rewrite between now and March. That made the list of things. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Mr. Weaver sent out a spreadsheet of work challenges that are an all-inclusive plan, and my understanding of everything that he does in his department. I get that. But I'm still not supportive of the amendment, particularly with property taxes. The benefit that you have with some of the plan review people on the other side of the counter is that you get to use the plan service fees and the other funds to supplant that. So I've had enough of raising property taxes this budget cycle, and I'd like to not this time.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Traney?
Mr. Chairman, I think we do need to fill this position. I think Jerry Weaver has pointed out that this will free up Erica to get this thing done. We need to have this position filled. We've been cutting the planning department enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Honeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's, we can be short-sighted and end up with some of the roads and some of the buildings that we've seen over the last few decades. We're getting better at it, but it's not by accident. We have to plan, and we need the adequate resources to do that. So I support the amendment, and we pretty much starved down to the bone, if you will. So I think we need a planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Johnston, and wrap up, I presume.
I'm sorry to come back. It's not usually my style, but it's taken me a while to think about this one, whether I can support it or not. I have had industry coming to me and saying that they too are needing Erica's time because Erica is the go-to person as far as Title 21, both new and old. And I've been using her, and I've been struggling whether this helps her or hurts her, if it makes any difference to our private sector. And I guess I really do need more information, and I really would rather, if this is really an extraordinary need, I think I'd rather come on first quarter budget revisions and have better documentation of what this position is going to be than address it now, because I just haven't had enough information to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I actually agree with Ms. Johnston to some degree, but I will couch it a little differently. For me, it's about priorities. If we were talking about a police officer, this would be a totally different discussion. But being that it's another planner, at this point, I just haven't been moved to support it, so I will be a no vote on this one. But I do appreciate the conversation, and I'm not resistant to having this discussion at first quarter either. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. And Mr. Starr?
To the administration, Mr. Mayor, in particular, we tendered quite a few amendments. We had a great work session on Monday. We have an S2 now that adopted some of them. This is one amendment that you still weren't moved to implement in the S2. Can you tell us why?
Well, I think I would concur with Ms. Johnson's comment that we could take a look at this at first quarter.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no one else in queue, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
No.
So by a vote of 6 yeas and 5 nays, that motion carries. That brings us to amendment number 3. Mr. Starr, do you intend to offer this one?
No, the mayor filled the budget needs a different way.
Very good. Thank you, sir. It brings us to amendment number 4. Ms. Gray Jackson or Mr. Trainee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Press your button, sir.
All right, there.
And Mr. Starr?
Well, I'm not going to be supporting this yet because I'm still not convinced. I got the answer back from the administration based on our work session questions, and yes, we have 6.5 people out running around doing a contracted service. I know this contract has come in front of the Assembly several times, and so my challenge is several, is that we're just going to throw money at it. We don't really know the service providing capabilities of our service provider, and I'm still not convinced, even though Mr. Trainee tells me he gets a lot of these calls. I have a very big territory in my area, and I have not yet calls yet that we're not able to provide service. Can they come right out? Maybe not. I'll concede that. But do they come out? Yes, they do. So I still don't think that $273,975 is going to do any good, especially when you're hitting property taxes for it. If there's another way to address the contract, bring a contract amendment in front of us some other way. We still have the chance to do that between now and April when we collect taxes. But I'm not ready to concede that just throwing money at it's going to fix anything.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can address Mr. Starr's comments, I just want to thank him for his comments. I really appreciate your concern when it comes to using tax dollars. But I'm just going to read this, a description of why we're bringing this forward. In 1999, the National Animal Control Association conducted a comprehensive study of the Anchorage Animal Care and Control Center, which highlighted the need for additional officers. Based on the number of requests for service and the coverage area of Girdwood to Chugiak, The recommendation was that we hire an additional 17 officers. This amendment is only bringing forward 3. We have a community of over 300,000 folks right now, and that means more dogs, more animals. And I really think it's important that we step up to the table and do something to help out the situation, not later, not tomorrow, but today. So I really would appreciate the support from my colleagues to do what is right on behalf of our community and their tax dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Honeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to echo, the local Animal Control Advisory Board has been advocating an increase in their discussion for agendas strategically going forward for a number of years, almost a decade now, I believe, and in addition to some changes at the facility. So I think this gets us in the right direction, but it's still going to be far short than what we really need. Not to mention that with more enforcement, perhaps brings more fines, levying of fines for those that are in violation, which means more revenue, which could offset some of the expense. So I'm looking forward to the support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Trainee, I have actually 4 people in queue, but I just want to let folks know, according to my calculations, at this moment we are, given the amendments approved thus far and those incorporated by the administration, we are $166,000 and change under the tax cap. Mr. Trainee?
Kate, on the budget, where are we right now with what we've approved? Is the chairman
Through the
correct?
chair, Mr. Trainee, the chairman is correct.
What's the number?
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, the number is $166,355 under the cap, 166,355.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, we need at least one of these 3. I'd want all 3 of them, but I'll settle for $100,000 this so I can get one person on the street. Since '99, things have not been static in Anchorage. As the father of the dog parks, I get calls all the time from people who could not get somebody there from animal control to take care of a problem with the dog parks. Maybe that's the reason you don't get the calls, Bill, but I do, believe me. They've got my number.
Mr. Trainee, would you kindly make a motion?
The motion is to reduce the amount down to $100,000.
Thank you, sir. Would you press your button? Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to amend this down to $100,000. I have a bunch of people in queue. Does anybody wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote on the amendment to the amendment. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. So by a vote of 10 yeas and 1 nay, that motion carries. We're now back to the motion as amended. Mr. Trainee, do you have further comments?
No, sir.
Ms. Johnston?
I was just wondering, through the administration, when is this contract up? When are we renegotiating it?
Can we come back to that, please?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Ms. Freeman's coming up.
Oh, you already know? Okay, very good. Welcome, Ms. Freeman.
Thank you. Through the chair, that contract we will be working on renegotiating that contract in the next few months. I don't know exactly when it is due, but we're starting to work on it now.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything else, Ms. Johnston? Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate the fact that there was a study done that indicated we needed more animal control officers. We also had a study done that indicated we needed more police officers, more than we have had previously, and far more than we have currently. And I think, as Ms. Domboski said, it becomes a matter of priorities. I don't see, the same urgency on this body about getting more police officers on the street, which I think is at a critical stage. So I'm going to oppose this on that grounds.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have received communications from several of my constituents about the amount of time that it was taking for them to get issues resolved, and they flat out told me they thought they were undermanned down at the Animal Control Department. So I'm going to be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Starr?
Mr. Trainee, we just let our dogs run wild out in my neck of the woods. But trying to add some levity to it here, we get a better accuracy on the tax ramifications at first quarter budget. It's a much closer to the net number than an estimate right now. So my observation, and it's a token, I may not change my position between now and April, but certainly that. But my question for the administration, Mr. Vacalis in particular, when on the back of my business card for the municipality is the control officer's phone numbers, and I also give them yours if the city's not performing, which is a true statement. You run the city, and you do it well. Do you get those calls of inability to answer the call? What's the nature of the calls that people are calling you on?
Yes, sir. I can honestly say that I have never had a dog call me. No, but I have had a few calls from constituents from different areas, primarily, sir, from the Bowl, not necessarily from Eagle River.
Do we get an adequate response from our contractor now about going out there? You call a lot of our departments and other leaders to say, get out there and solve the problem. Do you direct our contractor from time to time, or how does that interaction work?
If you look at the, so let me just make it pretty clear here. Yes, do we occasionally get calls? Sure. Do we get the number of calls associated with dogs that we do many, many other things? No. But if you look at the information that was provided, there's a sequence and a protocol and a priority list in which they respond to. The calls that we would typically get are way low in the priority, even though it may be an annoyance to some for a period of time, but it doesn't reach the level of emergency that some of those other calls do. Those we do a pretty good job of meeting. And so if you look at that priority list, the calls are really associated with the lower end, not the mid to top end of that priority list.
Yeah, fair enough. I appreciate the answers that you gave us back from our work session questions and the clarity of them. That table of priorities was new information for me, and I'm glad we have such a thing so we can certainly protect the folks that are trapped on the porch and can't get off. But the idea that we have to be all things to everybody in 5 minutes isn't that. My next question, without belaboring it, Mr. Vacalis, if we put another $100,000 into the budget starting January 1, what will you do with that? Is there, I mean, obviously I know the answer, but it really won't help us today to throw out a number if we're rebidding the contract, will it?
I mean, if the Assembly was to take that action, the Assembly intent is to, hire an officer. And so, we would do everything we could to honor that intent. And the only reason I say do everything we could, I can't guarantee that we could find somebody that would want the job. That's all.
Wouldn't we have to approve the contract revision and all the other stuff that goes with the new contract for
well,
animal control services?
we would certainly have to enter into an amendment to the contract, sure. Because, we basically have told them that they have to meet this criteria. And so there would be an adjustment, if for no other reason, to the amendment of the dollar value of the contract. And then, of course, in the contract itself, we hold them accountable to meeting the goals that's established by the priority list that we gave you. And in that, the 6.5 officers that they currently have is what, our expectation is. Whether that's realistic or not, I couldn't tell you. I honestly couldn't.
Thanks for the answer. My closing comments are, I'm just not supportive of this. Again, right now, it looks like we're making sausage. 273 was the initial need. Now we're down to 100,000. Again, it's a case of throwing money at it, and that's never a good solution long term. And I believe that the interest to renegotiate the contract and provide the best service is really the information that I need. We're underway doing that, as the director had told us. And so as that contract comes back for approval, if it can't be met with the budget amounts that we're doing, then I'm happy to revisit it between now and April. So I'm still a no.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the comments and discussion from my colleagues on this particular amendment. And I especially appreciate Mr. Evans' comments. But one of the comments that you made, if I can address Mr. Evans, Mr. Chairman, that you don't see this much enthusiasm from this body as far as getting more police officers. Well, again, with all due respect, that's just simply not true. I can speak for myself and several others. We've been major adamant for years about getting more police officers. So I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Ray Jackson. Mr. Father of the dog parks? All right, with that, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
No.
So by a vote of 4 yeas and 7 nays, that motion fails. That is the last of the operating budget amendments that I see in our packet. The only one remaining is for the enterprise funds. Are there any further ones of which I'm unaware? That's for the next one. Seeing and hearing none, are there any comments before we proceed to vote? Amendment number 5 applies to the enterprise budget, which is the next item. So we're done with amendments. Mr. Honeman, do you used to speak to the underlying budget, sir?
Yeah, I didn't want to get in debate when the animal control funding amendment was proposed, but along with Ms. Gray Jackson, and I'm going to just chalk it up to Mr. Evans not being on the body earlier, but I will tell you that there's not been one budget cycle that I haven't advocated personally, and the Public Safety Committee has supported adding additional police resources and fire resources for that matter as well. And so we've had several amendments, and just about every general budget as well as first quarter budgets, we've been very attuned to the need for more police in this community. So perhaps you regret the position that you took, but at the same time, it's just to let you know that members in this body have taken very serious the need for all services, but in particular our public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Starr?
Well, and I know the press is in the back and all the other stuff, but I want to be really clear on this one. Mr. Mayor, you're getting very good at preparing budgets and moving public service, and this is your last budget that's going to come to us from your leadership, and I will tell you, you've gotten very good at it, and it's a huge compliment. You oftentimes hear only the nitpicking, and you didn't do this and you didn't do that, but I'll tell you what you did do was you reached out to your department directors early on. You told us you were going to. You said you tasked them with areas to scrub the budget. You did that probably back in May or June, if I recollect, and you engaged, and I think that's when good government occurs, is when you reach out, and you did that. Your staff was very good. I will put a kudos out to Ms. Mahoney. You got a good service from her leadership as well. So I like also what happened, whether it's because Ms. Gray Jackson was chair of Budget and Finance and I wasn't. We resolved amendments quickly. We got an S2 version prepared by somebody in Budget and Finance late last night. It means your staff was really working hard. So all I want to take away right now is that you've done well, both on previous leadership years and particularly this one. You've gotten very good at it, and I will miss that. So kudos to you and your department. I hope we can stay on budget, state revenues stay up, and all the good leadership will continue in your absence come, I guess it's June. But thank you for that and your ability to prepare this document today.
Thank you, Mr. Starr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Starr. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote on the S2 version as amended. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
And so by a vote of 11 yeas and 0 nays, that motion carries.
Chairman, move for immediate reconsideration, urge a no vote.
Second.
You can't have as many people.
Sorry, moving for immediate reconsideration, urging a no vote.
Mr. Trini, if I may, we actually have time, so if for some reason we've made an error tonight and wish to revisit this,
It's your choice.
I don't think it. I don't.
Timing off.
I think we'll be just fine. We have plenty of time before the end of the year if we have to
Sure.
reconsider.
I would beg to differ. I think we have the 7-day requirement after a public hearing, and then we're going to be required another public hearing if you want to do that. Between now and the end of the year, Mr. Chairman, it'd be awfully tough.
We can do it either way, but we actually have a meeting on the 2nd, which I think is within our windows, so if someone reconsiders tomorrow, which would be the limit, we have it before us on the 2nd.
Fair enough.
So if it's okay, I would like to give ourselves the flexibility to correct any errors we may have made.
That's administration, which way they want it.
Ms. Gaillard, do you have any concerns in that regard?
Mr. Chairman, we don't. We prefer to have it done, but it's up to the body.
Mr. Wheeler, is my interpretation correct? If someone reconsiders and we bring this up on the 2nd, we don't have to reopen the public hearing, correct?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the window is, 14 days, I think, so I think you're okay.
Okay. Okay. So we do have the motion in front of us, so as soon as I can, I'll commence to vote, but I would encourage members to vote. Actually, I can't really do that, can I? I'd actually encourage Mr. Trainee to withdraw his motion if he can. Mr. Train, are you willing to?
You should hand the gavel over then, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, would be my take, because that's,
Yeah.
I don't want to have a challenge to the chair, but if you have a reason for that.
Yeah,
Flynn, sir.
I would appreciate, Mr. Train, if you consider withdrawing your motion, again, just to give ourselves caution. If we've made an error somewhere and we want to come back and revisit it on Tuesday, we have that flexibility. Your choice.
I'm not going to withdraw it, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then please proceed. Oh, Ms. Domboski, before we vote?
I just support a no vote.
Okay, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
No.
And so we will not be reconsidering. That brings us to item 4B, AO 2014-119, an ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the 2015 Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Operating Budgets and the 2015 Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Capital Budgets, brought to us by the Office of Management and Budget, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 554-2014. What is the wish of the body?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Trainee?
Mr. Flynn,
Thank you, sir. I move amendment number 5.
Second.
would you state what amendment number 5 is, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, this is a deletion of $100,955. It's in the text, of course, we refer to the external affairs position, which is something I believe is superfluous. However, obviously, the port management can allocate that reduction, should it pass, in whatever form or fashion they prefer.
Is there a second on that? Okay. Comments, Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Flynn for bringing this amendment forward, but at the same time, I just really don't think it's a good idea at all. The port project is a multi-million-dollar project, and if any department needed an external affairs person, or whatever you want to call that person, this department does need this position badly, in my opinion. So with that said, Mr. Flynn, again, thank you for bringing this forward, but I just can't support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Starr?
Well, I think it's a good idea, and Mr. Flynn, has a history of looking at budget details greater than some, and I appreciate his willingness to sort of scrub it. And this actually is from conversations that have occurred concurrently with history that he may know, is the consolidation of communication outreach folks under the MSI contract, in particular with the city, is a helpful contract to have. We have revisited that a couple times, and in fact increased the MSI outreach contract for coordinated public communications, and I think clearly that they've done a nice job with that consolidation, and we were able to do some budget efficiencies there. I saw the answer today that came back from what this person potentially would do, and again, it was sort of a soups to nuts arrangement, but I felt that given the number of customers and the challenges at the port, the leadership itself should do some of those actions. And thirdly, I'll say that the CH2M Hill contract clearly has a position in there and will probably do the technical speak, the presentations thereof, better. They've been able to sway this body through good information in terms of direction. Sway might be the wrong word. They've done a nice job of providing information to us to make decisions. CH2M Hill has in work sessions prior. Not that we believe everything that they say, but they're very good at it. So I think if we're paying them, we feel like the MSI contract can be supplanted and also get the directors to take on the roles and responsibilities indicated today. I think it's an adequate cut, and it's time to be fiscally aware of our ability.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If possible, I would like the administration to answer for me. My understanding is this position had been vacant for a while and has recently been filled. Can someone tell me how long that position has been vacant for?
Several months, but it's been a continued active position since we came on board 5.5 years ago. Emily Cotter, and then Britt after her, and now Suzanne Armstrong filled the position. So, the gap in having it filled was very short compared to the overall continued position being filled.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to be contentious here, but my understanding, I spoke to the previous port finance director last evening, and I was under the understanding this position had been vacant for about 1.5 years.
I would have to check on that date. I mean, again, for nearly 6 years now, it's been a mostly filled position, We wanted to get the right person down there, given the nature of what's going to be happening over the next 4 or 5 years. So it was important that we fill it with the right person, not just a person.
Sure, sure. And if I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Rebuffo a couple of questions.
Mr. Rebuffo, you kindly come forward.
Mr. Rebuffo, I have to apologize because I didn't see my pro and con list, and from what Mr. Starr is saying, obviously it's my fault for missing it in my emails. So can you give me a quick rundown? What tasks does this person or this position do that maybe, as Mr. Starr said, you as the director could take over or reallocate to other people?
Well, I can speak to the most recent vacancy that wasn't filled until about 5.5 months ago. What I did as the deputy port director under that role, well, first the port director took on none of the tasks that were, that would have been with that position when it was, when it was vacated when Lindsay left and went to the mayor's office as communications director. I took on the responsibility of managing the website and let go. We have a Facebook page and a Twitter account, and we just did nothing with the two of those. And at the time, we were in a mode where we weren't outreaching to the community the way we had in the past when we had the expansion project, because there was really nothing to take out to the community. A big part of that person's responsibility in the past had been coordinating presentations in the community, working with the media, doing press releases. None of that was done at the port when that position was vacant.
Now, maybe it's just ignorance here, but my understanding was something like that. Couldn't that be a job that's coordinated through the mayor's press person?
It was for a time.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's helped me make my decision. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you bringing forward, and I will support this amendment. I have not been swayed to see that this is a vital service and one that can't be accomplished by others, so I will be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Ms. Johnston?
Mr. Rebuffo, could you please come up again? Sorry.
If anybody else wants to talk to Mr. Rebuffo, please raise your hand. So we don't have him running back and forth.
I was interested in the list that you presented, and as Mr. Starr said, it was quite a wide range, including marketing of the port, marketing it, real estate marketing for clients. And I can, for the last 5.5 months, or actually for the last 1.5 years, 2 years, when we reassessed the port development, I can see where it was not particularly needed. But now I'm concerned because who is doing the marketing? I mean, we know now that we need to be out marketing for industrial clients if there's a gas line. And who does that?
Well, we're such a small staff. We all play a role in making these things happen. But somebody needs to take the lead on it, because we each have functional areas that we're responsible for. The port engineer is responsible for overseeing the contract for the project. The deputy port engineer oversees the operations of the port. I oversee everything. Now, I will be the point person when it comes to going out and having appointments with people, but there's somebody that needs to coordinate that effort on a daily basis, because there really is a lot of it that has to get done. We get a lot of inquiries from industry, people that want to come down and see the port. We get a lot of interest from schools that want to bring classes down and tour the port. Without one person who can be the focal point for all of those actions, it's hard to make time for the rest of us to fit that in with everything else we're doing. It's been an important role. We've put a lot of those kinds of things on ignore, for lack of a better word, when we didn't have someone in that position. But I think it's important now, under the circumstances, to get back into that.
Is there a deputy director now?
There is.
So there is somebody taking your place?
Yes.
And who is also responsible for a lot of that?
Right. There is a lot to do in a small staff, so we share the wealth as much as possible.
And we do have, MSI has a public relations contract throughout the city. And does MSI work with CH2M Hill as far as the development program?
I don't think so. In fact, I've never worked with MSI in the entire time I've been down there.
Mr. Vakelis?
Yes, ma'am.
I saw you look. No. So MSI does not work with CH2M Hill, and so any of the I don't want to call it public relations, but the information coming out of CH2M Hill's contract is done in-house by CH2M Hill, is that correct?
And their subs, yes.
Okay. And, Mr. Mayor, are we looking at hiring an additional lobbyist this year as far as the port?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Starr, did you have a question for Mr. Rubel?
No, it would lead to debate, and I don't need to badger the witness, so to speak.
Okay.
So.
All right. Steve, you can sit down, but stay close, please. Just in case. Oh, you want to talk to Mr. Steele? Let's go to Mr. Honeman first. Go ahead. Just stay close, Steve.
I do want to make sure that I'm clear. When I'm looking at the org chart in the book under Enterprise, I'm seeing a marketing director and special administrative assistant 2, and I believe it's showing special administrative assistant 2 as the deletion. Is that right, Mr. Chair? So if you're talking about the marketing things and answering inquiries and such, what would a marketing director not being able to do that, at least the initial point of contact, coordinating with your executive assistant? It looks like there's a whole, even though it's a small staff, it looks like there's enough.
I think the semantics here is that is the position that we're talking about.
So you have 2 blocks under your org chart.
And I believe one of them is an unfunded position, and no one is in it.
Marketing director?
Well, may I come see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
You have 2 spots there. One's marketing director, the one's special administrative assistant 2. Mr. Chairman, I need clarity then. He's saying that the marketing director's position we're talking about, not the special administrative assistant.
Yeah, that's the one that we've begun to call external affairs because it is a conglomeration of things that were done in multiple positions before that are now unfunded and vacant. So all of that has been rolled up into one position description, and that is what this particular position takes care of.
I'm a little confused. Perhaps the administration can help.
Mr. Vacalis is in the queue after Mr. Steele. And Mr. Trainee, is that okay? So with that, Mr. Trainee?
Mr. Michaelis, what's your position on this individual down the port? Do we need to keep this position, sir, or get rid of it?
I believe that position is needed, and I just want to clarify some of the questions that's come up about the 2 positions. There used to be 2 positions down there. One was a communications director and handled those type of activities. The other one was a marketing/government affairs person, and that person handled those type of activities. When funding cuts came, that position, marketing, was eliminated, so to speak, from funding, even though it still shows on the book. And what happened was to be able to utilize someone to do all of the functions that's mentioned, then all of those functions from that other position was combined with the communications director position. And in the document that you all received last night, I think it was made pretty clear exactly what the job description calls for that person, and I think it also very clearly defines what CH2M Hill's responsibilities are. Their responsibilities, and I'll repeat it in case someone did not get a chance to read, their responsibilities by contract is to take care of internal communications for the project. And what does that mean? That means basically to ensure that all communications are captured and go to the right place, whether it's an email, whether it's an official document that comes in, et cetera, and to retain that in some type of a catalog file so it can always be obtained. Secondly, they're responsible for the communication within the folks that use the port itself. And the reason for that is, as the construction is going on, CH2M Hill will have to constantly communicate with those folks down there that use and operate out of the port. It also further says in the contract that all external communications, and that's communications with community councils, government entities, the public at large, the media, will be handled by the external communications director from the port. So those are very clearly spelled out, and CH2M Hill does not have that responsibility whatsoever. Now, the other thing that's clearly spelled out in the contract, they will assist in gathering data as it pertains to the construction project and provide to the external director, but that person is responsible for the communications. There's a communications plan that was a part of the contract, and that very clearly spells that out. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Michaelis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Steele?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our meeting the other day, we were talking about visits to the port by cruise ships. It seems to me that's a logical customer that External Affairs could coordinate with, and it's really important to us during the time of this construction that we take care of people using the port. And the cruise ships coming and going, that's going to be those people's impression of Anchorage. And I'm hoping that this particular, one of the responsibilities is to make sure that those folks get the service they need. And I know the cruise ships probably have a person on site as well, but it just seems to me it's important for us to provide good service at this point.
There are several aspects to cruise ship management that fall under the responsibility of the port. The operations piece of it, coordinating with the movement of passengers and getting the ship tied up in service while it's there. And there's the public outreach piece and coordinating with the Holland America Princess side of the house to make sure that what's required of the port in support of their mission gets accomplished. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Michaelis, I still have you in queue. Did you get to say what you needed to say?
Thank you very much, sir. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that there are a number of positions throughout the city, especially in the enterprises, that have this same external affairs, public relations type of role. I am always a bit suspicious of those positions because, quantifying and objectively determining their value is often difficult. But that being said, I see no evidence that this particular position and this particular organization is any less valuable or less needed than those others. It seems like the port's staff is relatively small. I don't think it can be described as fat or overblown by any means. And while I appreciate, like Mr. Starr said, the scrub of the budget and looking for ways to reduce costs, I certainly find it easier to avoid adding positions than I do in eliminating positions, which means somebody loses a job. So with that in mind, I just am not convinced that this is a position that should be eliminated, and I will be opposed to the amendment.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Starr?
Mr. Michaelis, I didn't print it, but could you read the rest of that, the job duties as assigned in the response? It shouldn't take you long. The upper half of the memo that you just read, the lower half clarified the CH2M Hill contract descriptions, but I didn't bring the email that the department had said. Well, I'll do it because Mr. Evans said it, but he didn't agree with the logic on letting that position go. So much of the communication that I believe has to be done is levels that would be higher than this person as I would see it, such as the overall conversation that we want to have with the general population that all is well with the port now. We're starting to move that direction. I don't want that message to be set up, no offense, the director is probably qualified to say it, but with Mr. Sheffield's experience, I think he probably overstepped his communicative bounds from time to time in advertising the services thereof. And then, so my point is, I believe that the mayor's office, MSI in particular, is a better way to go. The other thing that I noticed is that the development of the business development plan is part of this develop and manage the business development and marketing strategy for the port overall. Public affairs relationships with government affairs, the media relationship, obviously the community outreach was already mentioned. And again, it's sort of, I don't mind that, but I would rather see it at an elevated level. And again, by contrast, Merrill Field is the largest or the busiest municipal airport in the country during the summer. They do it with half the staff. So you have 9 people. Merrill Field's director may not be happy, but he's losing a position as well, and he's not down here. He sort of sucked it up. So by the pure numbers of that, you're going down from 22 to 21 and a half. Your budget's increasing without this change about $300,000. I'm pretty comfortable that your needs have been met on this budget cycle. So Mr. Flynn's right. It's an unfilled position, and I think we take the money away. So I'm still supportive of the amendment, and it's time. The duties just don't justify having that position filled.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Demboski?
Thank you. I think Mr. Starr just stole my thunder. He's good at that. He's really good at that. No, yeah, we do. Great minds think alike. But, I go back to priorities, If we were talking about taking money and putting it to the police department for more police officers, I'd be all over that. When this one, I don't see how. I think this should be a job that's absorbed at higher levels or within the mayor's office. I don't see taking taxpayers' money for this particular job when, to me, it really hasn't been justified at $100,000 a year. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Demboski. And Ms. Gray-Jackson? Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just clarification, because I heard Mr. Starr say that the position's vacant. Isn't it filled right now?
I believe it is
It's
filled
not
now.
vacant. It's filled. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston? I'm sure in wrap-up?
This is wrap-up. I just was clarification that this is an enterprise fund.
Yeah. All right. And Mr. Mayor, you wish to offer a thought?
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up, Ms. Demboski, this is not a taxpayer-funded position, so it's paid for by the wharfage and fees and the tariffs that come across the port. And quite frankly, the port has already consolidated into this position. This position is actually performing the function that 2 people used to perform. They've already kind of bit the bullet on this, and quite frankly, the workload down there is going to do nothing but increase as we move forward and become, a growing, larger customer-based port. So, again, they've already taken the cuts, they've already consolidated, and I think this would be a bad mistake to eliminate this position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
No.
And so by a vote of 5 yeas and 6 nays, that motion fails. That brings us back to item 4B. Is there any further discussion on the enterprise and activity budget, operating budgets? Seeing, hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 4C, AR 2014-250, a resolution approving the 2015 to 2020 Municipal Utilities Enterprise Activities Capital Improvement Program, brought to us by the Office of Management and Budget. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 558-2014. I have no amendments to this. May I please have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing, hearing none, as soon as I can hit my button, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Ms. Demboski, would you kindly, Ms. Demboski? Ms. Demboski? Would you kindly press a button? Either one's fine. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to rush you. This is the capital budget for the enterprise activities. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 4D, AO 2014-120, an ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the 2015 operating and capital budget of the Anchorage Community and Development Authority. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 555-2014. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
And that motion carries unanimously, which brings us to item 4E, AO 2014-121, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting the 2015 General Government Capital Improvement Budget, brought to us by the Office of Management and Budget, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 556-2014. We also have an S version of the capital budget and an A version of the memorandum. May I please have a motion?
Move the S version with the A version of the memorandum.
Second.
Thank you very much. And actually, It's labeled A1 for some reason, Ms. Johnston, so would you kindly... Yeah, thank you very much.
A1.
Second.
Okay. There's only an S that I have. Is there an S2? Oh, we have an S2. Oh, that's...
I'm sorry, we did have an...
We do have an S2, yes. Just keep late breaking. Is that what you wanted to mention to us, Ms. Gaillard? I'm sure it was.
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to amend your motion?
Could I amend my motion to the S2 version?
And the A1.
With the A1.
Second.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. I believe we have some remaining amendments. First one on my list is from Mr. Steele. Mr. Steele, amendment number 1.
Not going to move. No.
You're not going to move it? Okay. And the clerk has asked for a moment. We'll pause. All right, that brings us to amendment number 2, Ms. Gray Jackson and Mr. Traney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, Mr. Traney. Based on the section of the code that's quoted in this amendment, this project should have been carried over to the 2015 budget from last year, and I'm sure that the administration inadvertently omitted carrying it over. So with that said, let's make believe that it has been carried over, and I'm going to move to delete it from the 2015 budget.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, so moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Ms. Domboski?
So clarification, we're not actually moving the amendment to put $10.5 million in. We're just making sure it's deleted from the 2015.
Right. And if I can follow up, Mr. Chairman, just so that the public understands what I've just done, I'm going to read a section of the municipal code to you. 6.1045, continuity of capital budgets and capital programs. Once approved by the Assembly, the amount of specific appropriations, project descriptions, and budget years for individual projects within the general government capital budget, capital program, and utilities capital budget, capital programs are considered permanent legislative actions of the Assembly and may be altered in subsequent years only by a majority vote of the Assembly. So based on what the code says, my motion is to delete this project from the capital budget, capital improvement program, capital budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Traney?
There's going to be another amendment coming forward with another item to deal with the issue of tennis courts.
Mr. Mayor, do you wish to add to that?
Oh, just that we concur with Ms. Gray Jackson's motion.
Thank you very much, sir. Seeing no one else in queue, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
And so that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to amendment number 3, Mr. Starr.
No, not going to move it.
Okay.
I'd like to comment on that if I could, just briefly.
On the amendment? We're going to get to the underlying discussion.
Thank you.
Momentarily.
We'll to the end.
Okay. Amendment number 4, Ms. Domboski or Mr. Starr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move amendment number 4.
Could you push your button, ma'am? And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you. This is a project, Old Glen Highway Safety Trail, Voiles Boulevard to Lake Hill Drive. Essentially, this would add to the capital projects list for the Chugiak Community Council.
Thank you, ma'am. Seeing no one else in queue, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
No.
Ms. Johnson?
I'm sorry, could I have clarification which one my paperwork has gotten?
We're on number 4. It's the Old Glen Highway Safety Trail from Voiles Boulevard to Lake Hill Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Now you get to press a button. There we are. So by a vote of 9 yeas and 2 nays, that motion carries. That brings us to amendment number 5. Ms. Domboski or Mr. Starr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to move amendment number 5.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Mr. Chair, this is the Voiles Boulevard Safety Trail, South Peters Creek exit to Homestead Road. Again, this is on the Chugiak Community Council's top 3 for their CIP list, and I would like to add it to the projects.
Thank you, ma'am. Seeing no one else in queue, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Smart move.
Mr. Starr? I think I can guess, but and that motion carries unanimously. Mr. Starr, were you going to move amendment number 6? It's sort of in and sort of not.
Not moving it.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's all the amendments I have.
Mr. Chairman, I have another amendment, if I may.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay, we can call it amendment number 7, I guess. Okay, and it's submitted by Mr. Traney and Ms. Gray Jackson, and the amendment is, the Department is Parks and Recreation, and the description is, construct open-ended fabric roof cover for 6 East High tennis courts, and it's for 2015, and the funding is a state request for $600,000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Second. I'd like to add my name to that, please.
Oh, well, Mr. Traney was already the second, but thank you, Mr. Honeman. And Mr. Starr?
I think we're making sausage late in the day here. I don't mind the conversation. I engaged it pretty heavy when we had it, if you all remember. I'd like to see the school district come to the table for a little bit on the conversation. They've got significant new inventory. We didn't talk about it much during the discussion on the other tennis court project, but I'm not certain that this is the answer either. So what I'd like to make certain is that the school district, if you're talking about East High tennis courts owned by the Anchorage School District, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I just can't support it this late in the game. I think we ought to have some conversations with them and put it on their list. There's a skating rink that's covered along Lake Otis, just past, I think it's this side of UAA.
It's a Windler.
Yeah.
A Windler.
Yeah, pretty rough use there. It's cold and dark, and they don't come out right. So if we think it's going to be like the Sports Dome or something else that's over on a private entity, I think we're sort of mistaken at $600,000. So I can't support it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Traney?
I intend to support this, and ask my colleagues to. It's in my assembly district. I know the people live in that area, and this will be a nice addition to that neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just wanted to clarify exactly what the amendment is. We're taking outdoor tennis courts at East High, and we're going to be putting a roof over them so that they can become indoor tennis courts, and we assume that that's going to cost only $600,000.
I think Mr. Sullivan is in queue and can probably help answer that question, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you very much. This is only partial funding. We were working, ever since the vote on accepting the money from the state that did not pass the Assembly, the Tennis Association and other entities have been working to come up with a solution that was much more cost-effective and at the same time provides, during our inclement weather, an opportunity, particularly for the high schools, to have a season out of the rain. It's an open-ended facility, so it's not an enclosed facility. It's basically just a fabric cover, and what it would do is, again, allow, because East is the only place in the bowl that has 6 tennis courts, you could have all the makeup matches that get rained out, and this year was horrible for the school district. They had to cut matches down to 1 set. A lot of the matches did not get played. A huge setback for, a growing town like ours. And so the fabric roof really just allows a place to play out of the rain, but it's not a public tennis facility as was envisioned before. It just simply is, again, a fabric rain cover. It'd still be open air, essentially. Won't be used in the wintertime. It just allows spring through fall a place for people to play out of our sometimes very inclement summer. And other sources of funding, we're working with some of the known entities. I don't want to mention any names yet, but I think we know who the groups are that help fund projects like this. And the group has been very active over the last number of months working with different entities, and this would probably cover about half the cost.
Mr. Peterson, anything else?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Honeman?
Just a reminder, too, this is actually Mr. Peterson, I district. It's right there on the drawing line on the east side. But I certainly encourage support on this. But, we are looking at leveraging dollars from different sources, and I think that's a smart way to do it. At the same time, we know that if we don't act, there are consequences to that. We saw that with the North Courts that we potentially could have purchased at a fairly decent price. So I encourage you to support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Starr?
My frustration boils over sometimes in fairly direct speak, but did we just make this up in the last couple days? I mean, this is what gets us in trouble when we approach the public or we go to Juneau and we don't have an organized plan. So we had budget amendments that were tendered at a work session on Monday. This wasn't one of them. It's the first I've heard that we're talking to other agencies and other entities. Mayor, help us help you or whoever's leading and directing the project so we know what we're talking about. I had John Rada on the phone several times today talking about McDonald Center stuff. I would have thought that if it was a new plan, he could have talked to me about it as Parks Director. I'm frustrated that we're making the assumptions that the school district thinks it's good. Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to operate it? They want to play at night, then you're talking lighting. It's a challenging project for me, especially when we don't seem to be doing the appropriate and good government by putting it out there, having a public discussion about it, talking about it. We're going to run down to Juneau, and people are going to, some are going to buy into it. Yo, tennis, I play myself, but others are going to go, where did this come from? And this is challenging for me to do today. And so I don't mind that. What's the school district say about it? Why wouldn't we just give the whole thing to the school district and say, you build it for the kids? I'm frustrated with the conversations and the way they occur. I'm flexible with the best of everyone, but this isn't very well conceived.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Steele?
I agree with Mr. Starr in terms of the way it was handled. But my questions go to we're taking the school district's tennis courts. Whose tennis courts are there? They're public courts, obviously, but who manages, who schedules, who rents or leases, if that's the case, on these facilities?
And I can answer those questions, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like.
You happen to be in queue, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Well, Mr. Starr, you're right, and this has just really been coming together over the last number of days. We've met with Mr. Abbott over at the school district. He concurs that this is a good site and a good solution. He, like many others, don't want to see us step backwards in terms of, a lifetime sport all of a sudden, being diminished in our community. It's basically designed as an open-air, translucent fabric, so you don't need lights. You don't play in the late evening if it gets dark, but of course our summers are fairly light. And again, it's not a winter facility. It's just simply a place to play out of the rain. And and again, you don't need all those other amenities. It won't be leased. It won't be rented. It'll be just like going to the park strip and playing, except there's a rain cover over the top of you. Now, the other part of it is it can work a number of ways, but ideally, because of the public use of it, the thought was that in talking with Mr. Abbott, he had no problem with the concept of Park and Rec actually managing the facility, but we imagine that management would be absolutely minimal.
May I have a follow-on? Mr.
Steele?
My concern is that these are school district facilities, if you will. If the tennis folks, the competitive tennis is going out to play, and they've got folks on it doing a match or whatever. Who does the disputes? I mean, who schedules the courts?
Yeah, as far as any organized play, the school district would schedule the high school matches just like they do now. East High is used now for high school matches, as you know. It's used, for tournament play when appropriate. So as far as that kind of use, the school district would absolutely be the one scheduling for high school tennis. And if there's a rain makeup that's needed because it's raining over in the west side of town and they can't complete that match, they've got a place now that's covered where they can make up a rain match. And that's one of the key things. With the sale of the Alaska Club North, we lost those 5 courts. They're now, purchased by a private entity. So, of the 9 courts, we're down to 4 inside. So you can't make those up inside like we used to. And again, it's going to be bare bones, open air. It's not fancy. It's just a chance for, people to play out of the rain.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, Mr. Steele? Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I started with this budget season, I had a laser focus, and my focus was to ensure public safety was the top priority. It was to ensure that infrastructure projects are done above all else. It wasn't to spend $100,000 on somebody to manage a Twitter account. So to me, where the money comes from or how we're asking for it, I think it matters. I know the school district just found $22 million in their budget. So if this is a priority for them over teachers, I think that should be a decision for them to make. I don't think that would be a good one, but that's their decision to make at this point. So to me, with that, it's not to disparage anyone who brought this forward at all. And it's not to say that it's not important to some, But when I'm looking at legislative asks, I think it's important to make sure our roads are taken care of. I think it's important to make sure that some of the things that we've asked for public safety are at the forefront of the conversation. And considering the drama we went through last year with tennis, I can't imagine that legislature would appropriate this in these fiscal times, but if it makes it through, it'll be a decision they make. But from this body, I want to put forward a clear message that our priorities are public safety and infrastructure. And that's where I'm at, so I won't be supporting it. But I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate the good intentions that brought this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say that I agree with everything Ms. Dombrowski said, 100%. I truly do. But let me just explain a little bit, since Mr. Train and I are the sponsors of this amendment, how this came about. Everybody knows the issues that we dealt with last year with the tennis courts, and frankly, I voted no because I didn't agree with the process. The process was inappropriate, so I voted no. My no vote by no means meant that I didn't think that some segments of our community who like tennis should have a facility. Mr. Trainey and I met with Mr. Kaplan and Mr. Clendaniel, I think about a month ago. And last year, Mr. Trainey and I put in $10.5 million for a facility, a multi-purpose facility. And we did that because that's the process that you follow. You put it in the capital budget, and then you take it from there. And so, as I said earlier, the code requires that, projects that are in 1 year remain. And so we had no trouble or issue bringing forward that amendment that was in the budget last year, once again, based on the fact that we told Mr. Kaplan and Mr. Clendaniel that we would be happy to do that, but then the rest was up to them to go to Juneau and fight really hard to get the fund. Recently, Mr. Train and I were told by the mayor that he had some discussions with Mr. Kaplan and Mr. Clendaniel, and they agree that it's going to be really, really difficult to get $10.5 million from Juneau, and that this amendment instead was a better route. And that's the reason why Mr. Train and I brought this amendment forward, and I just wanted to make that statement. And if they agree with this, Mr. Kaplan and Mr. Clendaniel, which the mayor said they do, then I'm going to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Starr?
Yeah, the conversation on compromise is one that we don't always have here, and I will concede it. I didn't want you to question why I voted yes after I said I was going to vote no. Mr. Mayor, I don't really have any problem with that. I think I've heard your priorities. I got notice the other day that you've moved the tactical range, the police training center, into sort of our Big Ten. Mr. Vikalis, I think, told me that we've reprioritized. So, honestly, I'm fine with it being in the big book, but I'm not happy with it being in the blue book. So we're going to have another conversation, I think, on the second, on the sort of legislative priorities and how we stack the message. And so, Ms. Gray Jackson, I appreciate your diligence to what's in the book carrying forward. When I first started here on this, sometimes the previous governments would just take the whole book and say that's our legislative priorities, go to Juneau and try to get everything. That strategy doesn't work. So, Mr. Mayor, I think you've done a good job in the legislative draft, prioritizing what we want to have happen. Tennis courts, if it doesn't rise up here, if we want to have a conscious conversation, I'm fine putting it in the capital budget, but in terms of authorizing that it makes sort of the blue book, I'd like to talk about that next Tuesday again on where we prioritize that outreach sports. Besides, I don't want a bunch of tennis player emails anymore. I actually play the game, and I'm supportive of it, just not at the $10 million level. So, yes, vote my way, and I guess let's keep the dialogue alive. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
So by a vote of 10 yeas and 1 nay, that motion carries. That concludes our amendments on the capital improvement budget, item 4E. Mr. Honeman, you wish to speak to the capital budget, sir?
Yeah, I know that Amendment 3 wasn't moved forward on the Muldoon Road East Anchorage Town Park, which is commonly referred to in our area as the Muldoon Town Square Park. But I just wanted to remind the body, we do have about $1.5 million of legislative money based on what you'll be seeing the East Anchorage District Park, which will address P&Z's comments on what the path going forward or what their recommendations are, and I think they're fairly solidly placed. Their recommendation is to have a master plan, which could consume upwards to or more than $500,000. So roughly a third of the dollars that were appropriated for improvements to that area are going to be consumed by just having the plan. As we know, they're fairly extensive. So I appreciate Mr. Starr's intent behind this amendment. He and I have had a conversation, and we're willing to let this slide, if you will, at this moment, and probably look back after the session as it moves along, and we'll see what happens in the capital appropriations from the legislature. I think it's going to be pretty thin this year, so we may end up coming back either first quarter or perhaps in the building of next budget for an appropriation amount similar. So I just look forward to having that conversation of the East District Plan coming up, I believe, next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 4F, AR 2014-249, a resolution adopting the 2015 General Government Capital Improvement Program, brought to us by the Office of Management and Budget, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 557-2014. Ms. Johnston?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Mr. Wheeler?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would like to suggest a couple of amendments to make this more clear and to reflect the changes made in the capital improvement budget.
Yes, sir.
At line 15, insert the word amended after the word as, and at the end of that line, insert parens S2 end parens, so that it reads that the 2015-2020 General Government Capital Improvement Program is hereby adopted as amended by AO 2014-121 S2.
Thank you, sir.
Move.
Ms. Domboski has moved that amendment. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Starr?
Well, you brought it up, Mr. Wheeler. The conversations that we've had with the administration and I'll preface it, there was quite a few amendments that were tendered. Administration adopted them, sort of put them in the S2 in spirit. A couple of them were language changes. I know I had one as it related to the tactical center and some of that stuff. So when you put the as amended language in there, are we comfortable that the amendments that were sort of adopted and the corresponding language and all the categories of the dollars, even though we don't have that in front of us, is it going to be done?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, I'm not sure what you mean by is it going to be done. Are the changes in the capital improvement budget going to be included in the improvement program?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. And how is that done between now and the time we also do the draft legislative packet while you're here? Some of the wording that we take out of both books is what becomes the wording in the program for the draft program on the 2nd.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, in terms of the program booklet that goes out to the legislature, my understanding is Shalon Harrington will be today finishing up those changes. And I think she was going to be here. Oh, there she is. If you have any questions in that regard.
Okay, now you were at the mic, so I appreciated the amendment. I support it, and I think we ought to do it.
Thank you, sir. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote on the amendment. Mr. Evans, Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Whoever's on the phone. Thank you. So that motion carries unanimously. That brings us back to the original item as amended. Seeing no one else in queue, please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall.
Yes.
And that carries unanimously, which brings us to item 4G, AR 2014-251, a resolution adopting the 2015 through 2020 6-year fiscal program brought to us by the Finance Department, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 559-2014. Ms. Johnston.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Honeman.
Well, from time to time, I've not necessarily voted in support of the fiscal plan going forward for various reasons, but one of the things that, a couple of things that highlighted to the, while I appreciate Mr. Starr's comments from earlier, and I do appreciate the administration and all the department heads making sure that they meet the objectives that were set by the administration. There are two bodies to this local government. We don't have the third branch, of course, for the courts, all run by state. But one of the things that I've really concern myself with when you look at public safety, strengthening public safety. Nowhere in there does it say update or upgrade our staffing to meet the objectives of the community as we've grown. We're at 300,000 now, actually beyond that since 2013. And as we just highlighted from last weekend, just one incident alone can tax our infrastructure and our resources that we have available to us. And so, it's nowhere in here is it designed at all. In fact, if you go to the last one of the plans for sustainability, it still talks about cutting and reducing. And while I appreciate that there are times that we'll have to, on this body, make the difference up in what we have available to us and what we need to spend, I just, for principle, I'm not going to be able to support this 6-year fiscal plan on principle, the fact that it's just not addressed. And we cannot continue to do what we've always done. We're going to come up short every time. And I think we need to have a fiscal plan that shows the adequate resources to the growth that we've had as a municipality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Starr?
It's always fun because Mr. Honeman reads his stuff, and I appreciate that. What this is a roadmap. I use it for sort of an accountability, especially when we have big cost overruns or when we find that our revenues didn't meet expectations. And so, we've had situations in the past where we've sort of woken up and been $17 million short or $33 million short. So what I first do is I pull that fiscal plan off the shelf and want to know the ramifications of that. Correspondingly, we've made some good strides getting the school district to come up with one of these. And I believe that if you take the two documents and lay them side by side, you can see the $1.2 billion worth of spending that occurs inside our community. And when things don't go well, it's only a plan, a program plan, whatever you want to call it. So I don't want to have no votes to this because it needs to be that's the case. Well, we do our budget work, which we've just done previously, to send messages to chiefs of police and others that says, hey, we've appropriated by department this amount of money. I think it's our accountability to put that forward. We've done that well, almost to the tax cap this year. But, Mr. Honeman, I think, given the benefit of the doubt that it's a plan, we're going to have an election in April. It's a good question to ask the candidates. What's your fiscal plan? Decreasing state revenues, all the other stuff. It's going to change. This plan doesn't lock us into 2020. This plan locks us in for another year. So I'd like to send a message that we at least have concerns, have accountability, but no messages are I don't know if it's necessary at this time.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston?
I just want to echo Mr. Starr's comments and also cite in the plan that it does give us notice that what we will be dealing with the state or could be dealing with the state and with all of our capital wants and needs, probably our biggest ask to the state will be revenue funding and to maintain our unfunded liability cost at 22%. And that could have a huge effect on us, and this 6-year fiscal plan makes note of that, and I think we need to always keep that in the front of our heads.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Hall? Missing a couple. Yeah, that's right. So by a vote of 10 yeas and 1 nay, that motion carries. That brings us to the conclusion of our agenda. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a few comments, if I may.
Please.
First off, I want to thank OMB and the clerk staff for helping us through this process. And I also want to take a moment to thank all the departments and the staff in all the departments for your service to our citizens. I think this was a pretty amicable budget process. As a matter of fact, my numbers may be off a little bit, but I was really happy to see that the mayor took about 95% of our proposed amendments and added them in his substitute version of the budget. And it's really, really wonderful to see the executive and legislative branch of government jointly recognizing the importance of providing the necessary services to our citizens. And I think this is probably a first that I can remember, but it doesn't matter. It happened. And the fact of the matter is, and I think this number is right because I had this number before, we had $2.5 million left on the table that enabled us to provide more services, and it's only going to cost about $22 per $100,000 for $300,000 of assessed property. and that's a small amount considering what our citizens are going to get for that dollar amount. And I just wanted to say that. And again, thank you to all of our staff and all the departments for providing the services to our citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Starr?
Well, just trying to plan my Thanksgiving weekend here, we didn't reconsider some of these things. So, you know, if there's a question that we should have put the park amendment in and all that, tendering a reconsideration on Thanksgiving Day isn't really helpful. But I think I asked several times now, the draft packet will have the changes in it by Tuesday, and a new draft packet coming our way. It's a lot of work. So who's going to give us that priority listing between now and Tuesday the 2nd?
Ms. Harrington has disappeared from the room, but, oh, there she is. Are you nodding and saying you got that?
You're on it? Great. Because I think we do have a charter requirement to have it approved by a certain time, early December, so we can't go past December 2nd on the charter requirement to get the...
And of course, we will not have a work session on that. We're not likely to have a work session on that before the meeting. So if you do have amendments, please get them to the clerk's office so they can be distributed.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Domboski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not on the budget, but I just want to, there was a little bit of confusion, so I just want to remind members that it is not the full body that will be hearing the Eberhardt matter. On Monday morning, Mr. Trainee, Mr. Evans, myself, Special Counsel Levesque, and the clerk will be here bright and early at 7:30, and we're planning on 3 days of hearings from 8 essentially to 5, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which we're dedicated public servants, so we're looking forward to Tuesday when we'll be here for an assembly meeting as well.
Possibly till midnight.
Yeah. So we will have a long day, but I do want to remind the body, it's not everybody that just has to show up, just the 3 members of the hearing remand panel.
And Ms. Domboski, my thanks to you, Mr. Trainee, and Mr. Evans for taking a big one for the team.
Well, you should see the reading material we have for Thanksgiving weekend.
I probably shouldn't, actually. Mr. Honeman?
Well, I just wanted to, again, also express my thank you and congratulations to all the department heads, of course, OMB administration, and making sure that we've got a good budget. And just to remind the public as well as, you know, obviously sometimes I need my own reminder to, you know, again, we work collectively to build a budget. And at the first quarter, we get a chance to adjust or amend if necessary, if the funding dollars are available. And what I'm proud to say that since I've been on the body, that, you know, we have had millions in surplus left, sometimes in the double-digit millions in surplus left, and that's not by accident. That's by making sure we spend very fiscally conservatively, if you will, very smartly, and sometimes it pains us to have to make some of those adjustments. I don't believe in this municipality that we'll ever get 100% zero spent, much like, you know, in the old days in the military when we have zero-based budgeting, and I think that's a good thing that we have surplus funding left over at the end of each year, not spending every penny we can get our hands on. But to say that we don't have challenges ahead would be inaccurate, and to say that we need to make sure that we adjust to those challenges and include growth in our community and the amount of service levels that should respond accordingly is also would be inaccurate. So I think we need to make sure we do both of those, and I think we've done that as a body. So congratulations to all of us.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trainee? Well, before I ask for a motion to adjourn, it's been about 7 months since you guys were kind enough to bestow upon me the hot seat. And I want to thank each and every one of you. I have a lot to be thankful for this Thanksgiving, but one of those things is that you've conducted yourselves professionally with great decorum and thoughtfully. We don't always agree. We occasionally make a couple of mistakes, but I do appreciate that. I'm thankful for you, and I appreciate that you make me proud to say I'm a member of the Anchorage Assembly. With that, I'll take a motion.
Would you adjourn?
Second.
We're done.